There's no one on this earth like you, Corey, and there'll never be anyone like you. And when we have that approach of looking at everyone as individuals, understanding the great things that they bring to the workplace, that's where inclusion begins.
Welcome to the Path to Owning It podcast by Provide, hosted by me, Corey Brown, a marketing leader at Provide with over a decade in the healthcare industry. If you found us, you're likely an aspiring or established healthcare practice owner looking for tools and advice to begin your journey or take your practice to new heights. And you're not alone. So to help you achieve your practice ownership dreams, twice monthly, we'll tap into our unparalleled network of industry experts who will join us on our quest to provide the answers to your most pressing questions. Like what you hear? Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen. Today, we will hear from Kala Gibson about the importance of creating an inclusive workplace and how to do it well as a business owner. Starting his career at Comerica Bank in Detroit, Kala now serves as Executive Vice President and Chief Corporate Responsibility Officer at Fifth Third Bank. In his current role, he oversees the bank's corporate citizenship work, which includes community development banking, community impact banking, Community Reinvestment Act, inclusion and diversity, and sustainability. Kala serves on numerous boards and committees for national minority advocacy groups and museums, honoring African American heritage, and he also mentors young and diverse aspiring entrepreneurs. Kala, thank you so much for being on the show today. We are really excited to have you here.
No, thank you for having me, Corey. I've been really looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Yeah, and I'm just so honored to have you here, not only because you've always been a huge advocate for Provide and a crucial part of our integration with the bank, but also your fireside chat at our office a few months back was really so inspiring for me. I knew you'd be the perfect person to come on our show and discuss how to foster inclusivity in the workplace, and I'm just pleased you're able to join us, so thank you.
Yeah, I'm hoping I can continue that conversation. I always felt like you do these fireside chats and they're typically 45 minutes or so. And I prefer a 2-hour fireside chat, right? So I can really put my feet up and really talk about my life.
Yeah, we'll have to have a part 2 then for sure. Well, we only have about 30 minutes today, so I'm just going to jump right in with you here while I've got you. I would love for you to just give us a brief overview of your career and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, Corey. And I'm one of those unicorns, actually, that is kind of doing my life's work since I can remember. So if I go back, 45 years when I was 7 years old, the only thing that I've ever wanted to be was a banker.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was just based on some of the things I was seeing on TV. I'm aging myself now with the Beverly Hillbillies and Banker Drysdale. But it was the idea, though, that I wanted to be able to have an impact, right? And I love the game of Monopoly. And for those who are Monopoly fans know that, if you're the banker, you have a pretty nice opportunity or advantage than most people because you kind of understand how things are working with the game. So there's always been fascinated with finances, real estate, and what have you. And so, at 7 years old, I made that commitment, believe it or not, at 7, that, one day I'll be a banker. I wasn't 100% sure the type of banker I wanted to be. Again, I'm just going off of what I was seeing on TV, but I knew that I wanted to be in the finance industry. How I kind of figured out what I wanted to do in banking. And this actually occurred when I was 12 years old. And I tell people this story about in my neighborhood, how there was a financial center or a branch at the corner. And I had a paper route and I would deposit my, $75 a week or whatever it was I was earning into that financial center with the idea that I would save up to get an Atari set. And I remember one day riding my bike to the financial center to actually withdraw that $300. And there was a sign that said closed permanently, right? And I remember just panicking because my life's work, right, at 12 years old was in this financial center. And remember riding my bike back home, crying. I get there, my mom is laughing, saying, hey, there's a financial center 5 miles from here. Let's jump in the car and we'll go get your money. But that stayed with me because it was this idea of how important that financial center was to me, but then most importantly, how important it was to that community.
Yeah.
Because once that financial center left, it became first a financial desert, then it became a food desert. And eventually, if I go back to my old neighborhood, it's nothing there anymore. And all of that was led by the departure of that financial center that was part of that neighborhood. So then it dawned on me that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the person that would never let that happen, right? And if that was being the branch manager or the president of the bank, I was determined to be in a position to be able to prevent that type of thing from happening to a neighborhood.
Yeah. And we're going to talk a little bit about what you're doing for neighborhoods with Fifth Third Bank here in a little bit. But I would love to get your take, since this episode is featured around fostering an inclusive culture within your workplace. How would you define an inclusive workplace?
An inclusive workplace, and again, there's so many different definitions out there, but in simplest terms, it's a place where individuals can thrive and be their best selves, and where they have the tools and resources and the surroundings to be able to reach their full potential. Any opportunity for them to have a voice, to be heard, to be seen, and feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. So creating an environment where that actually exists, I think is pretty powerful. And it takes the term of inclusion and makes it a little broader than what we've heard historically when people talk about inclusion.
And you mentioned a few of these, but what elements do you believe a workplace needs to be truly inclusive?
Yeah, I think what's really important when you think about creating a workplace that's focused on inclusion, one, and most importantly, it has to be intentional and authentic, right? It can't be a public relations strategy or a strategy that doesn't really have anything behind it. It has to be intentional and authentic, and it has to be broader than ethnicity or gender or physical characteristics, right? Because the primary reason you want inclusion and diversity is that it helps you to actually be creative. So you think about this, in order to have an inclusive culture, it has to be a culture that welcomes everyone. And that's everyone who has different perspectives and different lived experiences, right? And when you have different perspectives, you're able to generate better ideas. And from those ideas come innovation. And from innovation comes, in business terms, either revenue enhancement or expense reduction, right? Profit maximization.
Nice.
And so it's kind of the core of being able to drive innovation and creativity is that you have to be inclusive in order for you to have diversity.
Yeah, absolutely. Why would you say when we are specifically talking about small businesses that it's even more important maybe to foster an inclusive culture within that?
Yes, I mean, this would be the case with small, medium, large businesses. It's all the same, which is that our world is changing really fast, right? And it's actually getting smaller. And when it gets smaller, you can see that it's much more diverse than maybe our individual neighborhoods or surroundings. And because most businesses are now global and able to use the internet and other ways to be able to get to people, you have to have enough inclusion and diversity within your workforce to be able to deliver products and solutions for this diverse world. You know, one of the things that we focus on at Fifth Third is this idea that we want our workforce to represent the communities that we serve, right? And the reason why you need that is, again, is that as you're trying to create products and solutions for everyone, you need those perspectives. So as our world continues to change and become smaller, and even as, you know, here in our country or in the state of Ohio, becoming much more diverse, in order for you to survive as a corporation, so that's small, medium, or large, you have to have the ability to, one, attract the best people, right? And those folks are going to be diverse. But also you have to be able to create products and solutions and services for a diverse group of folks as well. So one of the things that we focus on here at Fifth Third is that is one of our sustainability priorities is inclusion.
Yeah.
And because we don't believe that we'll be able to coexist or exist in the future if we don't have an inclusive culture to bring on different people.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, can you speak to some of the barriers to creating an inclusive workplace? What kind of roadblocks have you identified or experienced that you can give us some tips on how to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, I think for any organization, it's really around how do you make it a priority and how do you make it part of your overall culture? Because if it's not part of the culture and part of your foundation, one of your core values, it's not going to work. So when you think about all the things that are distractions as it relates to driving business and how there's so many things that kind of get in the way, you know, inside your organization and even some of the external environment things. But I think the number one thing that prevents it from happening is just prioritization and what's important to you. And so one of the things we focus on at Fifth Third, that inclusion is one of our core values, one of our really important principles. So it's always prioritized and it's always front of mind. When we're thinking about delivering new services to our employees, our customers, or any of our stakeholders, our communities, we're always starting with the foundation around inclusion, right? And how do we bring more people to the party? And so if it's part of that, it's a part of your foundation, your core values, it makes it a lot easier to push through. But again, there's so many different priorities out there. You just have to make sure that it's center for what it is you're trying to do.
Do you think that more organizations are making that a priority now than they have in the past? I guess I'm just curious how you've seen inclusivity change over the course of your career.
It has changed, and the name changes, right? So, there was a focus on diversity, then it was diversity and inclusion, then it was diversity, equity, inclusion. Now I think it's diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. I mean, there's things that's keep
accessibility.
Yeah. But the number one thing that's always there in the center is inclusion. Because you can't have any of those things. You can't have diversity. You can't have belonging, any of these things, if you don't start with inclusion. So I think it's had its ebbs and flows. I think there's external events that sometimes remind us how important inclusion is. I go back obviously to 2020 with not just the pandemic, because we always go back to the pandemic, but even with George Floyd, right, in 2020. I mean, there's so many different things that happened in the summer of 2020 that kind of centered us back to the importance of inclusion and to make sure that everyone has an equal chance at living the American dream. So I think there's always those things that push us forward, and then there's things that occur that push us back. But I've always been really positive and optimistic around how our country and our world, quite frankly, continues to change and grow and be more embracing of inclusion.
Yeah. And my last question before a quick break here, how do you know that you have created an inclusive workplace? You may think you have, right? But that might not always be the case. So how do you know I've done it?
That's a great question, because I think that historically in places that I've worked and lived, sometimes inclusion actually could do the exact opposite and be divisive. Because sometimes we go so far of trying to focus on, again, ethnicity or gender, we miss this whole thing of inclusion around thought and, again, a lived experience. So you end up excluding people. So what I've seen here at Fifth Third, I'm very proud of this, is that, we measure inclusion through our annual survey that we have with our employees. And it is this question around, do you feel like you're being heard? Do you feel like you belong? Do you feel like your opinion actually matters? And you look at every demographic that we have at the organization. So I'm looking for everyone to be in the same place, right? So if we're killing it, everybody feels like we're killing it, not just one group. Or if we're terrible at it, we all feel like we're terrible at it, right?
Yeah.
And so I know that we're winning when everyone is in that same range. And in our case at Fifth Third, it's the idea that we're improving. And I think there's this piece that we continue to focus on, Corey, which is around each one of us. It doesn't matter your color, your gender. We're all unique individuals. There's no one on this earth like you, Corey, and there'll never be anyone like you.
Yeah.
And when we have that approach of looking at everyone as individuals and understanding the great things that they bring to the workplace, that's where inclusion begins. And that's how you prevent the divisiveness that sometimes exists in corporations or organizations in general. It's this idea that everyone is included.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you. We've been, speaking about the characteristics of inclusive workplaces, the challenges that may arise when trying to foster one, and what makes them effective. But Kala, when we return, I'd like you to share how practicing workplace inclusivity helps strengthen the community. More with Kala Gibson after this break. Ready to take your practice to the next level? Meet the Provide Card, the credit card built specifically for healthcare practice owners. Available in addition to your Provide practice loan, with the Provide Card, you'll be transported to a world of new opportunities for your practice, where you can access the spending power you need to build your legacy. You can earn rewards on all purchases, all the time, with no rotating categories and no point expiration. At Provide, we're creating the future of personalized banking for healthcare practice owners. To learn how to apply for the card that makes your purchases go the extra mile, contact your Provide representative or visit getprovide.com/providecard for more information, including rewards terms and conditions. I'm Corey Brown, and this is Provide's The Path to Owning It podcast. We're back with Kala Gibson to talk more about inclusivity and how to be an advocate for your community. Kala, you participate in numerous community initiatives, from mentoring young folks to leading Fifth Third's innovative neighborhood investment program. Can you share a little bit about this program and your views on the connection between community building and inclusivity?
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Corey. And again, going back to our earlier conversation around this reawakening that occurred in our country, quite frankly, our world, as it relates to inclusion in 2020. And one of the things that we were trying to focus on is like, hey, inside the organization, we're making great progress as it relates to inclusion. How do we actually take the power that we have as a financial institution and help with solving some of these challenges that we have, these societal challenges around inclusion, and using our traditional capital, political capital, and social capital to be able to solve for that? So we started first with an initiative where we said we're going to give $2.8 billion toward this effort of accelerating racial equality, equity, and inclusion. And we're going to distribute these dollars. So this is philanthropy, this is loans, this is equity investments over the next 3 years. So from 2021 to 2024 into these communities to make sure that everyone, again, has an equal opportunity to be successful and to be included in the American dream. And so through that process, we actually created what I would call a crown jewel of our program, which is our Empowering Black Futures Neighborhood Program. And the idea was that we would create numerous opportunities around our footprint where we would go into minority communities. So in this case here, these are predominantly historically African-American communities, but we're looking to go into Latino communities and Native American communities and rural communities where we have the opportunity to really help communities to thrive and for them to have this opportunity. So we made a $180 million commitment. So if you think about 9 neighborhoods and $180 million, approximately $20 million per community that we were going to invest through, again, traditional philanthropy, loans, and equity investments. And when you think about $20 million, you're saying, well, man, that's not really a lot of money. But it is when you're doing it in a 1 to 2 square mile block, right? The idea that you're taking $20 million and doing that is pretty impactful. One of the challenges that we have is this thing called concentrated poverty. So, you don't have entire cities that are experiencing poverty, but if you go into any city, and I'm born and raised in Detroit, there's pockets of poverty. And so the idea is that if you adopt neighborhoods and try to solve this concentrated poverty one neighborhood at a time, the impact, one, you can measure it and see it, but most importantly, is scalable, because as you bring more people into this idea of neighborhoods and investing money in these small areas, you can really change the world and change the world in a way that everyone then has an equal playing field and the opportunity, again, to live the American dream.
Yeah, what a noble cause. I'm just happy to even be close to being a part of it, working for the bank. So thank you for sharing that. I'm curious, as a mentor and advocate, I'd love to hear your insights on how to effectively foster inclusivity. Let's start with entrepreneurs who are listening today. How would you counsel them on creating an inclusive workplace?
For entrepreneurs, it's really important because, again, entrepreneurs are the ones who are creating the future as it relates to products and services. When you think about all of the things that have been created over the last 50 years, it's all come from this entrepreneur mindset, this disruptive mindset of, hey, I want to change the world. And in order to do that, all entrepreneurs have to step back and say, how do I make sure that everybody is included in order for my invention or my idea to actually work? Because what we've seen in the past where folks had really great ideas, but they weren't thinking about necessarily the audience, right, or the final customer base. And so in this case here, in order to really be able to make sure that your endeavor is going to work, it is this idea of looking at a broad base of your customers, right, and understand how you can serve everyone and expand your customer base as the demographics of our country continues to change and expand.
That's a great point. And what about those for just getting started in the industry? What can young people do to help create inclusive environments as they begin and progress in their careers?
Yeah, I think in order, particularly if we're speaking to banking or, again, to your point, small business ownership, it is this idea of meeting and talking to as many people as possible, because it's really around this concept of if you have more perspectives and you start to build empathy and compassion, I believe that you make better products. And that's where we are at Fifth Third. I mean, the reason why we're focused on this, we really believe that if we have more perspectives, we have compassion and empathy towards our communities and all of our stakeholders, we're able to create better products, better solutions. And then just as important, we're able to attract the best people in the industry to help us to deliver on those value props and those commitments that we're making to our stakeholders. So I think it really is critical that you start with this inclusive mindset, to be intentional and authentic about it, because it's going to drive business results. And we say this all the time, it's the right thing to do. It makes for a better society.
Yeah. Now I'm curious, you're talking about meeting and talking with as many people as you can, right? In today's workplace, many companies are mostly remote culture. Can you still foster that same kind of inclusivity in your mind through a Zoom call as you can as being in the office?
That's a great comment there, Corey. And this is one person's opinion. I actually do believe that you can connect with anyone, anywhere, based on the conversation that you're having, based on your ability to listen and to understand. And this other piece of just really being interested in the person that you're talking to. Because I've seen instances, Corey, where people could be in the same room face to face, but they're not connecting and they're not following each other. Because one, maybe they're not listening and maybe they're distracted. And then I've seen people on, to your point, Zoom calls or a phone call have a really deep connection and conversation. So we can talk about the media, but to me, it's more about the conversation, right? And the ability to enter all of these interactions with this idea that I want to learn. I want to learn more about you. I want to learn more about your environment and how you grew up. And when we do that, that's when those true connections occur. So it's more about the conversation than it is about the media. Is it easier? Obviously, to be face-to-face with someone, but I don't think that's the silver bullet. I think it's the conversation and this thing of listening.
I totally agree. Absolutely. All right. Final couple questions here. Do you have any predictions for the future of what inclusivity in the workplace looks like? Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I think the world of inclusion is evolving. And it's back to some of the things I said earlier around inclusion, lived experiences, diversity of thought. So one of the things that we're focused on here at Fifth Third is neurodiversity. One of my sons, my oldest son, has autism, and it allows him actually to have a different perspective of the world, and it allows for him to bring insights that maybe I don't see. And so when you expand your definition of diversity just from kind of what I see, physical things, more to lived experience, and again, neurodiversity, I think it makes for a richer environment for us to continue to grow and develop. So I think it's evolving. And this idea around the lived experience. There's someone that could look exactly like me, can be a 52-year-old African-American male with glasses and a receding hairline, but we can have a totally different life experience, right? And have different things to offer and different perspectives. And so it is this idea of moving away from the physical per se and moving into your lived experience. And I think as we continue to do that, we're going to create a richer environment, an environment, again, where everyone believes that they can thrive.
Yeah. Final words of wisdom from you that you can share with our listeners around this topic.
Yeah, I think the words of wisdom, and it's back to something that my mom taught me early on, is that when we show up to meetings or conversations with folks, if we make it all about ourselves and what we're trying to get out of it, we never end in a good place. And so when it comes to inclusion and diversity, having a place where different perspectives and different ideas can thrive, it really is about putting the focus on the individual in front of you, right? And making sure that you're present and that you're understanding what they're looking to get out of this interaction and not necessarily what you're trying to get out. So it's this idea of just being selfless, I guess, and being really focused on other people outside of yourselves.
It's always our moms that have the best advice, right?
Absolutely.
For sure. All right. Well, Kala, thank you so much for this insightful conversation today. This is a really important topic, and we appreciate the tips you've shared with our listeners today.
No, thank you for the invite, Corey. And again, as you mentioned, Provide has a very special place in my heart, obviously, being there in the beginning. But I'm just so excited on what company and the organization is doing and the great people that actually work there. So thank you for letting me be a part of this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. It's our pleasure. Thanks for joining us. Because you've listened to this whole episode, we assume you're entertained, or at the very least, learned something new. If so, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Have a topic you'd like discussed in a future episode? Drop us a line in the comments section or send us a message on social media. If you're ready to take your practice ownership dreams into your own hands, be sure to visit getprovide.com to pre-qualify and browse our practice marketplace, or check out our news page for more helpful resources. The Path to Owning It is brought to you by the team at Provide, with support from Slide 9 Agency, and it's produced by PodCamp Media, branded podcast production for businesses. PodCampMedia.com. Producer Dusty Weiss, editor Emily K. Singer. For Provide, I'm Corey Brown. Thanks for being on the journey with us.
Provide is a division of Fifth Third Bank, National Association. All opinions expressed by the participants are solely their current opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Provide, its affiliates, or Fifth Third Bank. The participants' opinions are based on information they consider reliable, but neither Provide, its affiliates, nor Fifth Third Bank warrant its completeness or accuracy and should not be relied upon as such. This content is for informational purposes and does not constitute the rendering of legal, accounting, tax, or investment advice or other professional services by Provide or any of its affiliates. Please consult with appropriate professionals related to your individual circumstances. All lending is subject to review and approval.